and Scanning of Public Policy. Now over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you. Kirti, can you please start the PPT also? Yeah.
Yeah, the box is appearing that you are not being heard. So, all right. So today we carry on from where we left behind in the last lecture. Hello, are my young friends around?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. Can I start with a question? One simple question. Why do we study theory? Any one of you who can try to answer this? Why do we study theory? What is the need? I've been talking about Laswell, why drawer. I've been talking about others, but why do I do that?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
we study theory because we can, it guides us what we are studying. Basically, for example, when a researchers, researches on a particular topic, and he or she, the researcher collects the, his or her observations about that topic. So it helps us to guide to, study that topic clearly. What's there? What's the idea behind it? What's the thing behind it?
They're like lighthouses, in short, right?
Yeah.
Lighthouses, right? In the sense that, you don't have to get into the ad hocism of decision making. And Laswell actually started, why Laswell is known as the father of policy analysis, is because he was the first one who got the policy sciences together as a discipline, as something that could be studied. Because prior to that, we had a spoil system, in public administration, the spoil system that worked in America. And if you remember that spoil system, that's a direct, connect to the theory here. I'll take you back to the Pendleton Act of USA. Have you heard of the Pendleton Act? When President Garfield was there, 1892, and President Garfield was not managing well, there was an unemployed youth because there was such a high unemployment rate in USA. So an unemployed youth just came with a gun while President Garfield was walking through the crowd. He put it a point blank ray at his forehead and killed him. So Garfield was killed by an unemployed youth. That was the caption on the newspaper the next day. The whole of the America was shaken, and they said, "What are we doing? What is the problem? We have enough money. We've not been able to put the money into rational use. So what should we do?" And then the talk of legal framework, that how we should plan policies, how decisions should be taken. So all that discussion started, and gradually that was the beginning of public administration. In fact, a very, very kind of organized discipline of study of public administration. Then 1900, Frank Goodnow said, you cannot study public administration unless you understand the legal framework, because this is the framework within which we expect the bureaucracy to function. And then he gave his own theoretical groundings on understanding public administration. But still, decision making was like left to the politician, that whatever politician provides to us, we are going to implement it. There was a huge dichotomy debate. You understand the dichotomy debate in public administration? Tell me. You recollect the dichotomy debate? Politics and administration are two different things. And gradually, this dichotomy was bridged as the administration was better understood by decision makers, because even if they spent 365 days, 24/7, they would not be able to decide on everything that the country needs. So they said much of this has to be left to the person at the ground level, which is the administrator. So the administrator will have to take a decision. So that emerged as delegated legislation. So not everything will be decided in the legislature, The person at the ground level, the administrator, will decide. So what happened? Administrator also became a legislator. He was making laws. To a larger extent, he was passing ordinances at the local level, and he was deciding, taking decisions as per his own understanding of the legal framework with limitations prescribed by law, the due process of law. He was taking decisions. And so all this was going on in a very, very ad hoc manner. Whims and fancies of administrators. I told you the story of the Vidarbha district magistrate, Your Highness, whatever you want, I can do for you. So, that kind of a thing was going on. Laswell is known for the fact that for the first time he said that public policy is something which is very, very organized. And one need to take this as a separate discipline because it imbibes a lot of experience, expertise, technical understanding, behavioral understanding, relationship with people, and about the constitution of the country. And all this looks like a separate discipline. From Laswell, we are gradually moving into a little more sophistication of policy making, which is decision making processes. So we are gradually approaching better and more sophisticated, more efficient decision making processes. So that's how Laswell is important. And that is how theory becomes important for us, because if we didn't have a theory, how would we know whether we should go slowly, speed, incremental, increasing in bits and pieces, or we should, look back for a feedback? All these words and terminologies which have been coming into public administration have been coming into through the studies of public policy. So we had Laswell, we had Dror. Dror insisted that we must have more technology and more logical approach. We must have greater quantitative analysis rather than just relying on behavioral understanding of relationship between the administrator and the citizen. So we move to something that has really erupted into what we call today as governance. So now we are moving into another era. You've already got 2 days of rest. So the next era that comes after the classical end of the classical era is today. So what happened? First thing that I would say, can you change the slide? So the first thing that we see happening is that Laswell, Dror, and Charles Lindbaum. I'm adding Charles Lindbaum. I think it is not in your course, but I'm just adding to it that because they are all very important authors in public policy, very important researchers, because they were at the ground level to study. And Laswell, Dror, and Charles Lindbaum. Charles Lindbaum said that policy should be in short pieces. Now, you have grown up from a kid to this adulthood. Now, when you were small, there used to be only part of the chapter that the teacher taught you in the class. And you were given question from it, and then the next day you returned with your homework answering those 2 questions. That was half a chapter. Those were 2 questions and finished. Now, gradually you moved. One full chapter, you have to do reading of the whole chapter. So because there is greater trust coming in your personality, the teacher believes that you can do it. When you were a child, teacher lacked trust that you may not be able to do that because you are too small. Your language skills are yet to develop. And then one day, you are loaded with books and the teacher tells you, go to the library, don't come and ask me, sit there. Even if it is 12 o'clock at night, complete this work. And then we'll discuss this in the class. Nobody is asking you to write because nobody trusts that you will just write it. You may just cut and paste and bring it to the class. Let's have a quality group discussion in the classroom tomorrow. And then you will be asked to write a monograph on that, which will be very small. So what happens in the group discussion? You think all of you can, pass away the group discussion test? 90% of students fail in the group discussion test because many of them would refuse to open their mouth because it is sin. It's an evil job to open your mouth in a class, right? Some of the students know the answer, but they would still not open their mouth because they think that others know better. There is a lack of self esteem, there's lack of understanding, they won't do that. And then, the teacher applies incremental policy in the classroom. And that incremental is that she would always start from the person who is absolutely quiet. She could have started from the person who's so willing to speak, again and again, raising the hand and jumping on the chair. I know the answer. I know the answer. But the teacher would look the other side and ask the most silent, the most shy person sitting in the back chair to stand and answer it. Why? Can you answer me why? Let's be interactive. I will have to learn from you also. Why did the teacher ask the most silent boy to speak up? Are you hearing me? I wish to hear you too, please.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, maybe to motivate him so that he does not get demotivated.
Okay. Anyone else? Deepa, Taha, Aryan, all of you are sitting quietly. Please speak up. Why? Now imagine yourself in the teacher's place. You have to stand up in the class. Gorika and Preeti should actually put these students in the teacher's position and ask them to take up a chapter in the class. The point is that if the mic is given to the one who speaks a lot, others may be completely diffused, lose their, the confidence, whatever little they have, and then will never get up. So the thing is that teacher is always balancing, isn't it? Those who don't speak, they have to be raised, and those who are too voicey have to be little bit calmed down, so that there is a level of equality in the class. No one person is allowed to dominate, and no one person most silent is allowed to continue the way he or she wants to. So it is a balancing act. So by incremental policy, Lindbaum said that, see, we have to see whether administrators have the capacity to implement it, whether the government has the will to implement it, whether treasury will provide us with the money that we need, whether we have the skill sets available. See, post independence, there was this major problem with the country that they had all these big programs coming in one after the other. The post independence was an era in which Nehru was criticized for bringing in mega policies of growth, mega policies of power generation, of economics, and lots of areas one can just go on. And why most of the policies were collapsing one after the other. The first developmental decade, the 60s, was a big flop show. Not a single uh, policy was successful. And the second development decade was continuing with the completion of the first development decade. See, if you do not study for 2 days, you collect so much in your answer sheets that you cannot complete everything on the third day and pass a test on the fourth day. So there is a cumulative accumulation of all that was paid in the 80s when we started selling off our resources. Instead of earning, we thought, well, the vision of Nehru was that if we have mega policies right now, we'll produce more, we'll have more irrigation, we'll have better land to grow food, and better seeds from our farmers to regrow and produce the harvest that we want to. And we'll have a balancing between the urban and the rural. So all these were visions. But in the 80s, when all the group of Nehru was gone, we suddenly realized that in 80s, all that we were doing were to pay the debt and the amortization payments on the raw resources that we were selling for 1/13 the world price, 1/13 the world price. And so we were gradually and slowly destroying our economy in the 80s. And that made it indispensable that we open the command economy to, a more globalized economy. Globalization was indispensable. Why did we criticize globalization in the 90s? We had no other option. Nobody gave us money for food, for the destruction that the Green Revolution created. It created food. It brought more food. We were food self-sufficient. But where was the distributive ability? All the chuhas around were eating all the food in the Food Corporation of India. There was no way to preserve the food. There was no way to distribute the food. There was no will, no administrative system that could uh, supply to the last mile of a needy person. So there were lots of administrative problem, and this happened because we invested everything in one policy. And Charles Lindbaum is very clear on that. He said, let's be incremental, in small pieces. Try with, that's a typical education policy, educationist policy, Montessori policy, that start with something that the person understands, and also gives a chance to the teacher to assess whether that child will be able to carry it further, whether the limbs are strong enough to carry the load or not. So incremental policy was a great thing that Charles E. Lindbaum had brought in. So you understand the incremental policy, the reason for the incremental policy. But did you notice here that Laswell, Dror, and Lindbaum, all of them did one common thing? What was that one common thing? They were only occupied with the processes. They were all talking about processes. How to do this, how to do that, how to grow, how to advance, how to reach out. But nobody ever thought of how the policy is actually constructed, how it comes into being, how is it born. They never thought of it. Now you notice that? Just sweep your minds through Laswell, Dror, and Lindbaum. They are all focusing on the processes, not the way how the policy is born. So that's where the transformation takes place as we move on. 68, 70s, actually, we must say 70s. There were schools, different schools, and I would name a few of them. There was this Cambridge school, Keynes, after the First World War, the Great Depression. Keynes had given the theory of welfare economics. No, previous one, welfare economy. Actually, this slide is the most important slide. The rest of the slides are more to be thought of. So this is actually the basis of the theoretical design that we are going to discuss in the next slide. So you see, one was the Cambridge School. Keynes had given the theory of welfare economics, and he had spoken about, if you increase the welfare of people, then the growth is going to be more sustainable. What percent should be given? And then we have, this Austrian school, very, very rugged kind of an Austrian school, because they were not emotional at all. They were not very sympathetic to those seeking welfare. They said we must have a sure, short, clear cut cost benefit analysis. What works out should be invested into, what doesn't work out should be dropped. So very clear cut Austrian economics. It is known as a very, very rightist economics school. And then we have the Virginia school, James Buchanan, Elinor Ostrom. In fact, Elinor Ostrom was away from that. The theory came in, Elinor Ostrom's theory came in much later, whereas James Buchanan and Gordon Tullock had already started working in the early 70s on how policy is born. And how the policy is born is a whole process, how it is created. So, what if I ask you just now a question, how policy is created? You would immediately answer me legislature, because that's what I told you before last well. Legislature, because legislatures are supposed to frame a policy. It goes through the parliamentary committees, and after coming from the parliamentary committees, it is put to both the houses for voting, simple voting, and and that's how finally the president's signature, and it becomes a policy. But that's not really true. There is a big mischief that goes behind the framing of a public policy, and that is something we need to know. But that is also something that need to be incorporated when you take up research in public policy. The whole process is combined within the new cognitive psychology. The cognitive psychology started coming up in the 50s. And as it came up, there are more studies which were going around, and Adler's study was going around. Then we have many other psychologists who contributed to public policy. And Gordon Tullock and James Buchanan actually focused on that. And then a question was asked. Now I'm asking you that question. Okay, I give Kanishta Sharma one pen that I bought, an expensive, beautiful pen, and I give it to Kanishta Sharma. Kanishta, how are you going to, what are you going to do with the pen? Keep it with you, give it to somebody, or sell it off in the market? What would you do?
Ma'am, I will use it.
You will use the pen.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
okay, you thought about yourself first, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You thought about yourself. Okay, Surya, if I give it to you, what would you do?
Same, I'll use it.
Okay, but why should you use it? Why would you use it? Because, in the classroom, you don't need a very expensive pen. Somebody may steal it. You may create jealousy in your peer group that you are using a very expensive pen. But generally, you use 10, 20, 30 rupees worth of a pen. So why would you use it in the classroom?
Maybe I love collecting pens.
So you don't bring your whole collection to the classroom?
Okay, ma'am, I give it now.
You'll give it, not because I'm telling you to give it, but you'll give it. Okay, but see, the sense that comes out is that first you thought about yourself, right? And well, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay, I thought somebody said that can't hear. All right, so the first thing is that you thought about yourself. So that's the material we are made of. We first think about ourselves, what we can do with a free gift that we have received. So, Gordon Tullock and James Buchanan actually focused on that when a policy is created, the first thing that the government thinks about is, what am I going to gain from this policy? If I'm not gaining anything, then why should I frame this policy? And this is true with every government. And that is the reason why every government is called a selfish government. Gone are the days when the early researchers like Pigou in 1932 to 38 were talking about a good state, an altruistic state. But cognitive psychology actually exposed that the state is not altruistic or benign. It is a predatory state. It only looks after its selfish interest. And Gordon Tullock and James Buchanan gave a framework that was carried on by Elinor Ostrom later on in decision-making approaches. And they could prove that it is because of this approach of the government that policies are created for sectional interests, for group interest, for the interests of a particular vote bank. And From there, you see Douglas North and Oliver Williamson of the 1990s. That is where the eruption takes place. When the whole discipline of public administration goes into split pieces. And that is also one of the reasons why people started saying, why should we study public administration? Why don't you study just governance? Because the whole existing concept of public policy that was being accepted now becomes part of new institutional economics, in which Douglas North and Oliver Williamson said that a public department is behaving like a corporate department. There is no difference between the two. They both look at their own selfish interests. So what is the difference? Because in public administration, you start with the difference between private and public. You remember private and public? I still remember my public administration class. The first lesson is, what is the difference between private and public? And here the new institutional economics says, oh, there is no difference. The government department is as much privatized in their thoughts as it is the corporate department. They are both looking at their own very, very personal interests. And this is the framework of Hobbes, methodological individualism. You know, we are very individualistic at heart, but we can't say it. We are shy of saying that, no, I like myself. I love myself. I want to preserve my things. I want to be very benign and altruistic over surface in my personality. So I can go over the Red Fort and cry out and say, I want to give away everything. My life is dedicated for this nation. I want to give this amount of money to this, to this, to this. So you look very benign, very altruistic. The reality, as Douglas North and Oliver Williamson says, is that we are only resonating our business interests, whether we are in public or we are in private. In public, you are looking at the business interest because your business is sustenance of the present government in power. That is your business. And for that business, you have to be calculative for the vote bank, which is the lobby, which is the section which is highest in number, which is a very assured vote bank. And so you want to keep them with you, entice them to your chair, and then carry their interest. So you're carrying the interest of your vote bank. So Oliver Williamson and Douglas North erupted the discipline of public administration and brought this splitting of atoms of ideas, very nice ideas, very, very good, cozy ideas that were living and hiding into public administration because nobody wanted to share these ideas, because it was evil to share such an idea that public administration looks at the interests of the government in power. But here they brought it out all in the open, Douglas North and Oliver Williamson, that the government cleverly looks into the transaction cost. Now, I'll give you one example. Okay, there is a professor who gets the ticket for a political party. Now, the professor knows that most of the educational institutions in the country are going to vote for me. So what should I do? Should I go around university to university, hame vote DJ? Would that work out? Or I should just call all the, unions, like JNU Union, Delhi University Union, or Teachers Union, Fed Quota, and all these big unions down for a meeting in my private room, serve them lots of good things, and tell them, you give me this and I give you that. And then your vote bank is assured. This is the transaction cost that Douglas North and Oliver Williamson brought in, that nobody need to go. In fact, in my constituency, the person who's been winning for 20 years now has never visited anyone's house, because he knows that these are all elementary voters. I need to get the support, assured support of this vote bank. And this caste vote bank will all dump their votes over there. So this is how the voting takes place. So this is also, you see, a great impact on the representative democracy, which is reduced to nothing but only only technical representation. There is no assurance that the one who's representing you would bring back the policies down to all people. This is never assured. So Douglas North and Oliver Williamson brought this out in the open, that government is a businessman as much as a corporate person. CEO is the businessman. They all work for interest, they all work for profit. Votes are profits for the government, and money is profits, projects is profits for the business. And this has its problems. See, look at this cognitive psychology, the smaller slide next to it, the smaller box next to it, which starts with bureaucracy maximizes budget. Do you remember that bureaucracy maximizes budget? Who said it? Weber said it. Interestingly, Weber said it, and we are reinventing Weber. Weber had said that bureaucracy maximizes budget, and that is the reason he said that bureaucracy should be kept under control. And that is why he designed 5 basic principles to control bureaucracy: hierarchy, division of labor, written rules, impersonality, neutrality, 5 fundamental rules that controlled bureaucracy. And he was very happy that now bureaucracy will be controlled. He didn't know that bureaucracy has games to play under the table. They will share the political power with the political leaders. So, but okay, let's forget Weber for the time being. Bureaucracy maximizes budget. This is true. And I'll give you an excellent example for that, not from our country, because our country is loaded with such examples, which I don't want to share, but I'll borrow an example from USA. Clinton in 1996. So, after almost 2 decades of the end of the Vietnam War, Clinton suddenly found that most of the soldiers from 3 million, around 3 million soldiers who returned from the Vietnam War were showing symptoms of prostate cancer. So in 1996, out of the blue, he decided that everyone from the Vietnam War veteran would be incorporated into higher level welfare support, medical welfare support. And so imagine 3 million people coming for extended medical support, special medical support with higher amount of money being given to them, would now be supported because he was told by his advisors that they have got prostate cancer because they were exposed to Agent Orange, a very, very lethal substance that was sprayed in the Vietnam War to destroy the forests of Vietnam, to expose the guerrilla warfare people. So said the Agent Orange exposure brought the prostate cancer. Nobody wanted in his cabinet to look into the scientific findings, because if there was no Agent Orange exposure, at least 10% of men on a yearly basis of the total population otherwise also have prostate cancer. So that means for 300 million people, if you extend the budget in one go by obviating an understanding to scientific messages, that means that the political leaders don't want to really understand scientific reasoning. They want to win over the vote bank. So veteran vote bank with one stroke of pen, because they were 3 million returning in the late 80s and the early 90s completely from Vietnam. And then they were the ones who were suffering. They were the assured vote bank. And so Clinton it was a big budget breakthrough, which was thoroughly opposed, and later one reason for the fall of Clinton after 4 years. So this is how, the policies are designed by political leaders. So the two things that we come before we go to the next slide. First is imperfect information. In cognitive psychology framework, Douglas North and Oliver Williamson said that one reason why policies are not designed to their perfection is because there is imperfect information, and politicians ride over politician, and bureaucracy ride over this lack of information and design policies which suits the vote banks. And this also leads to imperfect competition. Imperfect competition, there is no department wise competition, there is no various levels of government competing with each other to do the best. People are not competing with each other, departments, so imperfect competition in the market, imperfect competition within the government departments, as a result of which there is a government failure and there is a market failure. Next slide. Now we come to the real test of public policy. So public policy, out of the discussion that we just had on various theorists spreading out their understanding of a public policy, how a public policy is born, you see that there are two conflicts: logic and emotion. Whether, logic means solid, hardcore, quantitative analysis, rationally decided means of data, and the other is emotion. Emotional means that you feel bad for certain people suffering, which cannot be converted into a tangible data, but it is there. Suddenly you walk into a garden and see all the butterflies are gone, and you say, where are the butterflies gone? Can you convert it into a tangible data? It would mean so much of research for so many years. Would the public policy wait for that? And then you see, why is it that one part of West Bengal, while just 200 kilometers away, people are rejoicing, they have such good harvest, but just 200 kilometers here, everyone is dying out with a kind of a cancer. They have varieties of problem, arsenic poisoning. So why are they having this arsenic poisoning here? So nobody wants to speak, nobody wants to share, but that is something you see. So from emotion starts the logic, from logic starts the rational approach, and from the rational approach starts the data collection. So that is how, the policy should be. But rational choice comes to how logic and emotions are converging. The logic and emotion are converging on a simple platform of self-interest. And this is the big change from Laswell, Dror, and Charles Lindbaum to the new institutional economics, that one can make a rational choice, but the rational choice is about a selfish choice. The selfish choice is how you bring your individualism out in a very attractive methodological framework, that you don't appear selfish, but you are actually very selfish. And that methodological framework, how will you design that methodological framework? I don't take my classes well, supposing. I am not regularly coming to my classroom. I am generally late. But then I'm a very good teacher because I give time to my students anytime after 2 o'clock, during lunchtime, during tea time. They can come and sit with me. I can talk to them, and I give it a logical framework. Have I surrendered anything that I am expected to be by my institution? No, because neither do I study nor do I take my classes, but the students will vote for me because I have given such loving time to my students. So that's how the government also works as per, the new institutional economics, methodological individualism. The teacher is good. The teacher shares so much with us. So much knowledge we gain by sitting with her. But actually, the organizational discipline is broken down, which the early rationalists had really vouched for. But the new institutional economics says that this generally doesn't happen. Okay, next slide. Now, I come to one statement that I made: government failure and market failure. When Sabatier's book was in fact the starting point. Sabatier, I haven't mentioned it here. It just suddenly clicked into my mind. Um, when Sabatier started talking about the new era of policy theories coming in the 90s, when globalization, liberalization was taking place, Sabatier said that, the big change that we see is, and this is how he explained, and this is how Elinor Ostrom also explained, uh, quite similar. And that is why Sabatier wrote a letter to Elinor Ostrom and said, please give me a chapter, the first chapter of my book, which he was editing on policy processes. And he said, I want my first chapter from Elinor Ostrom. So Elinor Ostrom prepared the chapter for Sabatier's book. What did Sabatier and Elinor Ostrom said? You see the wall here, and on the other side is the ocean. When the tsunami comes in, it will strike the wall, and the wall is designed in a manner that much of the tsunami wave would be diffused by hitting into the wall. So the wall is standing against a major disaster. Now imagine if this wall is the wall of institutions, and the waves, the tsunami which is coming in, is the tsunami of those politicians who are deciding on selfish interests. Then would they succeed? Yes or no? Would they succeed if this wall of institutions is erected over here and the tsunami of the greed and selfishness of the politicians and bureaucracy comes in? Would that succeed? No, it would not succeed, because it would be diffused, largely diffused by the institution. But you can always question and say, if the politics and bureaucracy is like that, why would the institutions be good? The institutions will also reflect what the politics is. But that's actually only partially true, because institutions have the backing of the constitution and the judiciary. And countries, now America, can you imagine a dictator coming in? The exit, the way Trump was exited from governance, the way he lived his 4 years, every institution despised him. Even in the past, any president could only be despotic uh, at his own cost, at his own peril. So even in India, there is no despot that has been able to survive. Somebody like Indira Gandhi could not survive, the most powerful woman ever produced in the world. Even she couldn't survive. So despotism never survives. It's a matter of time, but it never survives. Why is it? Why does it never survive? You remember the case of Raj Narayan versus Indira Gandhi? How it exposed the despotism of Indira Gandhi during, emergency period. And then how the number of cases, even in the past, the state was going on completely changing, amending the constitution. Shankari Prasad, Sajjan Singh case, one after the other, this amendment, that amendment, and 17th amendment, one by one. 17 amendments were brought into the constitution, and everyone looked with, oh my God, constitution is so much amended, what to do? And then comes the thumping of the Golaknath case, and with one stroke of pen, the judiciary said, come on now, stop it. This had to stop somewhere. And it was stopped. And finally, the balancing factor came in with the Keshwaran Bharti case, that you cannot change the basic structure. So this is institution. These are institutions. No administrator, no prime minister, no president can actually fight the institutions. So we cannot, even in the worst of situation, we can say that institutions are dead. Institutions live. Now, Sabatier has very nicely, uh, defined institution. Institution is not a building. It's not a set of rules. It's not a set of an organization. It's shared values. It's shared values. And that shared values may get the form of an organization, but the basic is a shared value. So the shared values are the greatest walls against the tsunami of greed and tsunami of despotism, authoritarianism that tries to undo the institutions that the country has. And who sets the limit? The institutions set the limit for these elected representatives. Now, why I'm bringing this argument here? I'm bringing this argument because the new institutional economics said that the governments of the present era, they look at their interest. And when they look at their interest, they create market imperfections. Why? Because they are not actually bringing the policy that the country needs. Poverty eradication program, 20-point program. It's poverty eradication has been the key program of our country, since the independence. 1951, when the first 5-year plan came in, and Nehru was very elated. He rushed to Vinoba Bhave, touched his feet, and gifted him the first 5-year plan. And Vinoba Bhave looked at the plan, took out the all-pin, placed it very gently on his desk, and threw the plan in the dustbin. Nehru was very angry. He said, "Why are you doing it? We prepared it with such acumen, the best of the minds, country and abroad. They were with us, and we prepared this plan." He said, "Where is the plan? You haven't touched the land. Land is the basic thing. If you do not start from the land, whatever mega policies you drop over from the top are going to collapse. They'll be eating out. You're only starting a regime of corruption in this country." Nehru was very angry. He walked out, and then he did what he wanted to do. And we see the crisis that also ended up in a very sad manner, pathetic manner on the country in 62, 64. We had the Chinese war. Our soldiers died without, uniforms, without shoes, without gloves. They were frozen to death. And then after that, you see the 60s, the 70s, we could not create a basic market for our people because we overlooked the land. And any government till today, if it overlooks the land, it will die out the death that we have seen of the past, and it will just bring in the poverty that we have been able to walk over in the past few years. So poverty we have not been able to do away with. We had Land Tenancy Act immediately. We had Zamindari Abolition Act, because these were the promises of Gandhi to the people. But we did not touch the land. Land was completely corporatized. 10 different people, Benami transactions, and all the panchayat land was eaten out. When all the panchayat land was gone to people who had money, then they created municipal corporations and district, town, and country planners for every district, and then state industrial development corporations for every state. And the three in nexus ate away whatever was left. So in very clear words, we go back to Vinoba Bhave's alert that policies are only prepared to take care of certain people, to sectional interests, not to the real will to change the country. Then came Indira Gandhi 20-point program. Then after that, now again, the government is talking about, Ujjwala Yojana, Bhavishya Nidhi, and insurance programs and whatnot. But ultimately, nothing worked, only Manrega worked. That was over the land. Only one policy that was in connection to the land, only that worked. And that was able to survive the country through the COVID times. This is the understanding, bad understanding about the land that our country, but they will not touch the land. Even in coming times, they will not touch the land, whatever. And the whole of the leftist debate is on land. The whole of the activism is on the land. The whole of the gender debate is on the land. The whole of farmers debate is about the land. The biggest lobbies are on the land, but the biggest of the biggest lobbies also on the land. And so land is the poor thing which is caught from all sides. But the moment you touch the land, you have to talk about caste, you have to talk about discrimination, you have to talk about equal distribution, and then you have to talk about the district administrators, taxes, collections, all that stuff. And power will in reality go to the panchayats, the biggest thing. Panchayat in the 73rd Act has 29 functions to perform. All over the country, the best of the performing panchayats have only maximized by three or four functions. Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh. I don't know about the Andhra Pradesh of today, but Andhra Pradesh of the past, they were the ones who were having the best of the functioning panchayats. But even there, the panchayats were performing 6 to 7 functions only, not more than that. But 29 functions have been given to them. Why would the government talk about the land? Because talking about the land would mean substantive attack on poverty, substantive changing over the reservation policy. Because who reaches out to the universities? We see a lot of reservation crisis, students demanding reservation in IITs, in universities. But I have always looked at it, and I asked one of my students to work on that, but he's still in the process. I say that how many of you reach out to the colleges? Look at the land distribution in the villages. The majority of people who are landless, who are laborers over others' lands, who are holding on to 1 to 0.5 hectares, which is the lowest of the land holding, they are the ones who are the poorest of the poor. They fall below the poverty line. But if you look at the caste factor, majority is 90% of them are SCs and STs. Not ST, I would not bring ST here because ST is a different category altogether. They are the SCs, scheduled castes. So if they have to go back to refining the reservation policy and bringing more justice into it, they should start from the land. The land distribution should be equalized. Equity should be there. And then the ones who reach out to the colleges are not just the cream of the SCs, but they are also those needy, and equal distribution of the benefits of reservation would then be given. Affirmative policy would show the light to the country, but nobody wants to do that. So it's only poverty policies, poverty reduction policies, but not touching the substantive section of poverty where the poverty will actually be eradicated. So it is only now the UN has also accepted that we can only reduce poverty, we cannot eradicate poverty. So we have already very legitimately and justifiably accepted that poverty is here to stay, because most governments would not touch the substantive aspect of poverty eradication. And this also substantiates the fact of new institutionalism, that governments will never touch the areas which actually threatens their existence. The battles of the Mandal Commission onwards. And VP Singh and all started that. Or take up any other, land movement anywhere in the country. The Bihar still has the largest number of fights and killings on land. And the biggest amount of pending cases in the courts are the land-based cases. And this is something which is not coming as a change, because if it changes, poverty will be eradicated and people will be lifted out of the below poverty line. So institutions are important. So when there is this market failure, because government is investing into something which is likely to fail, at least 3 5-year plans had to be withdrawn within 1 year of their bringing in. So that means we've had a very bad planning history, but that doesn't mean that planning was bad. But the present government removed the planning commission as if it was a evil wall standing over there, and now the Niti Aayog is only a clerical part of the government, which is just framing, which is not thinking of what is needed. There is no ground research which is going down and bringing the data up. There are these data collection agencies which are mostly Western agencies in collaboration with our own technical agents which are working. The social scientists is out of the rim, they are out of the margin. So that is what a government wants, and that is what they create in the frame of a public policy. So there is market failure, there is institutional failure also, because the governments are trying to do that. Next slide. Now, criticism of rational choice is also there. When we logically think and we reduce emotions, then we have tunnel vision. Why tunnel vision? That is why we say that very openly, we say that technologists have a tunnel vision, because they are not into the social scientist debate. They are not into, there is black and there is white. There is one positive wire, there is one negative wire. Electrical engineer would say there are two wires, you combine the two and light the bulb, right? A social scientist would say, how can the bulb be lighted? Because there are human beings sitting over here with hundreds of bulbs. How can two wire light 100 bulbs? So a social scientist only works in the gray area which the scientist has never seen, which is intangible, which cannot be coming into calculatedness. Buchanan's book, Calculus of Consent. See the title of the book, Calculus of Consent, means, I'll give you another example. You will understand it better. When the new city was created, Gurgaon, the original RWA of the city went to the court to say against the DLF that DLF has taken away all the land which it was not supposed to take up because it was the RWA land. The DLF said, your lordship, give me 1 month's time, I'll come with full facts. Within 1 month, they came with 154 NGOs, RWAs to the table of the judiciary. And how did they create it? Because every apartment they raised up was an RWA. So 154 apartments and 154 NGOs, and the poor original Karwa came down like, lost, like a Fakir Baba. It came out of the Chandigarh High Court. So, what is the problem with rational choice is a problem that it refuses to acknowledge these power forces that function, which cannot be brought in together in the data because they are intangible. They cannot be measured. It is very difficult to measure that. You can have group discussion, you can have one-to-one discussion in closed quarters with a bureaucrat. Even the bureaucrat would not come out in the open and talk about it. But all these discussions that we have in the process of research actually opens up the tunnel vision, but which a technologist may not be open to. And so the tunnel vision, like we are having now in the kind of Niti Aayog researches which are going on, and the tunnel vision creates the necessity of certain things which become indispensable, which works out well with the defense, but it doesn't work out well with a socio-culturally enlightened communities living their lives in the grassroots. Then there are externalities, which nobody imagines. Externalities means that the meta policy of drawer said that population should be reduced. Okay, to reduce a population, you have to look at maternal mortality rate, infant mortality rate. So, what are the policies? You need to have dispensaries, you need to have access to medical health, you need to have the number of doctors, so appointments should increase. These are all externalities which come in. If you do not calculate the externalities, then the meta policy alone would never be successful. You cannot bring down the population. So these are externalities which the rational choice refuses to acknowledge or has no idea about. So because of externalities, the rational choice fails. Then the government failure. The government fails because the government is not reaching out to the substantive part. And then free ridership. Can you see the free ridership here? The free ridership. You know, some people just don't contribute, they don't pay taxes, they don't come and function for it, they don't go and do out the work. Now, how many district magistrates actually come out and talk to people or hold meetings with the panchayats or ever come out and ask what the requirement is? At least all throughout my life, I have never seen a district magistrate ever coming out in the city, taking a round and seeing for himself how the city looks like. But this is the city that he governs. And we thought that with the 1992 changes of the grassroots 73rd and 74th Amendment Act, you know, the situation would improve, but then the panchayats are not able to function because panchayats are not appropriately designed and the deterioration is going on. Now they're completely neglected. They're not even consulted. In the whole Disaster Management Act, panchayats found no consultative position, even though disasters, they are the first responders to disasters. Imagine how we have overlooked how the higher bureaucracy has overlooked the requirements of the lower bureaucracy. And that is why, you know, everything at the land is bad. So free ridership, some people don't pay taxes, they don't participate, they don't acknowledge the good policies, because not all policies are bad, some are good policies. They don't do like the capacity building programs that were coming in the 70s and the 80s. Many of them were coming for women, but the men never used to bring women out. So the free ridership, the people to complete the targets used to bring women from here and there. I saw that in Bengal also. They were competing in Barashat district. They had to complete the target. So they, when suddenly we visited that place, we found 5 women sitting over there who were teachers in an adjoining school, who were not poor people from the slum. And they accepted it also because they were not properly guided that you should not share it with anyone. So this is how free ridership comes in. And then market failure. If the investment is being diverted to very selfish areas, the market ultimately fails. And market failed in 60s and 70s and 80s. And the whole of the Mahalanobis formula that Nehru brought in, the big formula, Bhakra Nagal Dam and SAIL, Steel Authority, and the mining projects and big things that were to strengthen the country actually failed. And we are still paying the price for it because any government that comes to power only wants to extend from it. There is one problem with the rational choice, that it goes ahead. And this was a criticism of Charles E. Lindblom also, when he said it should be small policies. So the next small policy that come in section of the policy will be derived from the previous policy. You can't innovate. Even in rational choice, there is very little innovation that is possible. Even if the government makes a thunderous noise and says that we must have innovation, where can you have innovation if your policy framework itself doesn't allow or incorporate the value of innovations? How an innovation is born? It needs a lot of socio-cultural research to bring the innovation out from the society into the policy areas. And those who accept it need not be working in a tunnel vision, but they should be people who have actually dirtied their hands in the mud of this country. That's it. And the last slide, is there any slide after that? I think, yeah, this is just covering up. because you have this in your course, mixed scanning approach. I know when I had pushed this into the syllabus, I thought this was important because I was not very experienced about the kind of policy making which the rational approach would take place. So I thought there must be some balancing factor, and mixed scanning approach was incorporated in the syllabus of Delhi University, and then the other universities also took it up. Mixed scanning, Amitai Odzioni, he published an article in 67 in Public Administration Review Journal, which is, a trend-setting journal for public administration thoughts. And he produced it. It wasn't a kind of an approach, even though he mentioned it as an approach and he was much criticized before that. Mixed scanning was actually combining the rationalist approach to the incrementalist approach. If you read that article, you would get an idea yourself. I would at least request the teachers here to read that article, because that article itself propels the idea that rationalist approach and incrementalist approach can work together. And how can they work together? Because while there is logic inserted through a rationalist approach, the administrator makes a proper selection, makes an assessment, and makes a stage-wise hierarchical survey of the problem. The administrator can also incrementally implement it. But what later was seen in the mixed scanning approach was that it was nothing much to offer on the innovation side or the newness of a public policy. It was more or less an extension of the classical approaches, in the sense that it accepted the rationalist approach. It gave little space to the public choices that the state makes. I should have used public choice while describing, this new institutional approach. The public choice is a choice that a state makes in new institutional economy. They make a choice for their vote bank, transfers the money to them, and then makes it look good and happy and gets the benefit in return. Just the way a businessman invests into a particular project, keeps it happy, and then gets the benefit out of it. The only thing is that while the state may invest into a market imperfection, the businessman will create a market perfection. And this is something that Etzioni could not bring into his mixed scanning approach. So we may read it, but there is not much to offer out of the mixed scanning approach. So that's where I end and open to questions. Please feel free to ask me questions, because this is the summing up. Summing up is rational incremental behavioral approaches from the Laswell to rational incremental approaches. We come to rational choice. In rational choice, we see individual choices are different from collective choices, because individually we may ask for something, but when we collectively sit together, we only go by the word of the group. So the public choices are different, and when we are a group, the state looks at us as the lion looks at its hunt. And so we are hunted by the state to make it stronger in the next coming elections. Mixed scanning combines the two, and that's how the cycle goes on. So all the approaches are interlinked with each other, even though their focus and their objective is a little different. So this is a summing up slide which you can take record of, and this PPT can be circulated. So Gorika, I end up at that, and the questions now.
Yes, ma'am. Any doubts, any clarifications, any questions, please feel free to ask.
Manvi, Vedehi, Sihag, Surya Mal, I can see your names. It's not good to close your video in your class. I don't know whether you are there or not. They are not.
Kindly switch on your video, everyone. Sorry, Malaysia.
Ma'am, actually, I had a question also.
Yeah, good. See how it
Like-
is to open up.
I'm like, I don't know whether I'm correct or not, but
You don't have to worry of that because
Ma'am,
you
a
need to
policy,
be incorrect.
ma'am, a policy is made for the welfare of the people and the
Hmm.
citizens of the country.
Hmm.
Therefore, by this privatization policy or the plan which the government gave in the union budget of 21-22,
Hmm.
it will definitely give a push to the economy, but at the cost of the people. Like, for example, labor laws, they extended the working hours for the people from 9 to 12 hours. So the private individuals have a tendency to exploit their workers. Obviously, exceptions doesn't break the rule.
Yeah.
But how will this have the welfare effect on the people?
Yeah, you raised a question which is a fundamental question, and that is what we were trying to answer in the rational choice. That the state is a predator. State is selfish. It is not altruistic. Don't expect that state. That's what I didn't say. James Buchanan and Gordon Tullock's research said. When they analyzed welfare programs, they analyzed more than 100 welfare programs in UK and USA, and then came to the conclusion that the state was funding its own benefit. Because how do they benefit? If somebody funds an election, there will be a transaction cost. The transaction cost that Oliver Williamson analyzed, the transaction cost across the table is that I put in this money into the elections and you give me this in return. So if corporates fund the elections, that is where the major demand for amendment is going on, but the government has yet not been able to bring an amendment into the Representation of People's Act 1951. Why? Because if somebody funds, then somebody will need something in return. It's not a one-sided process of altruism, of good heartedness. It is about transaction cost. It is about bargaining. And that is why what the rational choice says is that the state only funds into programs that bring something in return. So privatization, if there is too much of corporate funding going into the sustenance of the government, the programs are going to be according to the wishes of the corporates. If there is a bigger vote bank of the grassroots people, then the vote bank can bring a change. But that will happen if we have a literate society at the grassroots level. We are not caste ridden. We work by caste, we work by religion. We should cut through that. And the vote bank at the grassroots level, which is enormous, should not be sectionalized to vote. That is why rational choice is very clear that the state survives on these divisions. It survives on the policy that feeds the state, not the people. So people will never get a policy that they really want. So that answers your question.
They can do everything through bearer bonds. This opaqueness can be brought in very cleverly through bearer bonds. They can do anything, no?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Anyone else?
Add up to it. Nina, Nivedita ji, please add up to that wherever any point has been missed out.
Ma'am, Nivedita ma'am is not here. She has to go for some meeting, so she's
So
not
Nina,
here.
you can, all right. Nina, you can add up to that if you wish to, with your experience. See, Kudum Shri is taking the shape of an institution. And in Kerala, you know, the small NGO has grown up into a very big NGO which is now a platform for a large number of self-help groups and workers who are producing for at a very small level, micro level. And it's now every government is rushing to get the support of Kudumshri, because if Kudumshri is on their side, the grassroots workers are going to be on their side. So Nina, can you shed some light on that? Maybe students will benefit out of it.
Nina ma'am, you are on mute.
Kudumshri is also getting somewhat politicized. So that trend has picked up very early. That is another aspect. And the UDF government was trying to bring a parallel, but did not take root.
Absolutely.
That
So the
aspect
state
is,
is not altruistic. The good institutions will have a tough time to go. So, that.
And you examine the structure of Kudumbashri, only up to the panchayat level it is managed by women. From district level, the bureaucracy is managing everything.
Yeah, till the legislature. It's all
Yeah,
man
that's
managed. There's a whole lot of masculinity, and women have to look like men, if they have to sit with them in the legislature. There are very few who are actually churning out the demands for women.
But one positive thing is that, though at the grassroots level, in the panchayat elections, many of these women contested and a good percentage of them came out. They come out till the panchayat level, but not beyond.
Yeah. That is something one can, always find out in research findings. CDS has done a lot of work on this.
Very interesting. I don't want to take up so much time, but I went to one site of an MGNREGA, Manrega, and what happened is that the ladies, they were asked to attend a meeting if it is by the ruling party, but if they cannot go to the meeting of another party, the opposition. So such micro dynamics are there. Lot of it is there.
Absolutely. So any other question?
Ma'am, I don't have a question. I just want to ask something.
Yeah.
Ma'am, that why don't we have a I don't know if we have it or not, that any policy or program to enlighten the people in the regional language about the
continue.
About the laws which are followed in India, because as a law student, I find it very much harder for the normal people to get the law.
Yeah, so definitely. So cause lawyering is very important in our country, and your college can take up this interactive legal literacy program. Maybe you can take up legal literacy program in which you can involve all the law students and law faculty people into it. Maybe not more 1 week, 2 weeks program only.
Thank you.
NELSA and DELSA have such arrangements, not for the students, but they are barefoot lawyer type.
Barefoot lawyers. Yes.
Ma'am, we have actually really started with this program. Last week only we started with this Know Your Rights program.
Oh,
so we have adopted a village nearby to our college only. So we are, Ma'am, Chhatarpura village. It's very close to our college.
Urban village completely.
Huh? No, you can't say. Yes, you can say it's an urban village because an SEZ has also come up, a special economic zone has also come up. So yes, you can say it as a urban village. So we are, trying our bit. Right now, we have adopted this village. So let us see how we can move ahead with it.
Yeah. You should go beyond talk and Niwari.
Right. Yeah. Next time we'll, take up that village.
Or even towards the Bharatpur side.
Yeah. That will be too far.
Bharatpur side, no, 2 hours.
Yeah, Amita ma'am. Yes. Yeah, since Gauri has already said, we are going for Chhatarpura, but I feel like, under the UBA planning, the planning has come like the students should be, brought closer to the villagers. If we can contribute substantially to the villages.
Yeah.
So I find like it has become like very it's just like something like you have to just do it.
Yeah.
And this the substantiality of the thing has lost. So we are
Yeah.
just going there so that you contribute. It's all in the papers, it is all in the documentation. This is
Yeah.
one aspect of it. Second aspect is like, somewhere I feel, by helping them, the basic thing, like they have to help themselves is what I feel like. So by helping them, we are actually killing their own because like
Yeah.
in Neena ma'am would agree, like if you compare the northern part like Rajasthan, and if you compare the Kerala, I've seen many panchayats, they themselves do the work and they do it for their own self with help coming from nowhere.
Yeah.
But in Rajasthan, they always look like people should come to help us. I
Yeah.
think this tendency, I feel like there has to be some change in that. You
It's
have to help
everywhere.
yourself. It's
Yeah.
everywhere.
It's everywhere. We were working into the tea gardens of Jalpaiguri, and they said, "What have you brought for us? Why
Yeah.
should we sit with you?" But
Why should we?
when as a young teacher, 24, 25-year-old, uh, I was taking NSS students to Nivai and Kota villages. We used to stay there in the village in our own tents. And
Hmm.
every evening, the students used to prepare a skit. So when we took them around in the village in the daytime, and by the time we reached the village, reached the tents back into our own domain, half the students were ready that I'm going to act this villager, I'm going to act that villager. And they brought patriarchy, and they brought all the I remember that the students were the urban students, and they saw a death in a family, and there were about 30 people crying, and then at the same time talking with joking around with their relatives, huh? So the students noticed that. So one student returned, and she started copying those crybabies, which she saw in the death funeral. And
Yeah.
she cried so much, she went on crying for an hour. Then, other students had to pull her out from the stage, that it's over now. She said, but it's not over. They're crying for 3 days in that house. So, the mockery of the
Some of it,
villagers, the evil factors, that we
actually.
changed so many villages by doing that. You resonate with the villagers. Some villagers came and they started fighting. No, 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 you are showing so much violence on our women, but we never do that. Then they started
Hmm.
fighting amongst themselves. No, but you beat your wife, I don't beat my wife. So that kind of an interactiveness in play, in drama, in skits, and the best of the creativity of students also emerges out. Now
Yeah.
creativity is dying out because students are dug into their mobile phones all the time.
Right.
So lots has changed. We have to reinvent creativity into social welfare, and how we
Yes.
do it is dependent on teachers like all of you. You have
Yeah.
to design methods.
Yes. Also, like, one other aspect, I don't know, it's quite philosophical to say, but then somewhere, because we are already discussed theories and all, like when you said, individuality, yeah, individual reason is important, somewhere around the corner, the individual becomes selfish. So, and when we accuse the government, when we, government is always a predator, like that. So
Hmm.
what I feel like, it is actually the sum total of all individuals. So it's not surprising if it behaves like that. So,
Yeah,
what I feel like, even if it is like going in a selfish ways, round the corner, understanding the fact that they are selfish, we need to now, somewhere focus on plurality, or some collective good.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Going back to that utilitarianism where it says like greater good of greatest number, though it is like already a settled thing now, people
yeah,
don't think about it, but somewhere this has to be in cycle.
yeah. We have institutions which have reminded us time and again that no government can continue with a divisive policy for very long. They have to go by the word secular,
Absolutely.
fraternity, enshrined in the
Absolutely.
preamble. They may have few days of basking in the sun, but ultimately they will be thrown out.
Yes.
as the best of the dictators have been thrown out in the
That's
past.
what we have seen historically. We have seen this.
Yeah.
It has come out like that.
Because institutions are the great wall. We have those institutions. See now, Supreme Court for the last 2-3 years had been, completely submerged in the politics.
Submerged.
And
Yes.
what benefit the Chief Justice was appointed into Raj Sabha, which has never happened. It was breaking through the norms.
Actually.
But now we have the Chief Justice again. Somebody will come and take care of the institution because institutional norms are there. Every day we are seeing a decision which is countering the despotism of the government. Now,
we're seeing it.
Yesterday, that Narcotics Bureau has been questioned. That what are you supposed to do? Don't you have faith in your own organization?
Yes.
And it has been again come up. Yesterday the Narcotics Bureau and the court itself said that there should be no jail for those who keep this amount for personal consumption.
Yeah. Ministry of, yeah.
There should be no jail for children who are keeping this bit of it, because the trade has to stop. It doesn't mean by harming children you can bring down a mafia of drugs. There's a certain very strange things happening, but we hope institutions would take over very soon.
They will not touch the origin. They will touch only the last person who is consuming.
Yeah, which will make so much of noise. Sushant Singh Rajput, now Ananya Pandey, the way things are happening. Oh my God, Well,
and attention diversion is also there. Make a hell lot of a noise.
Yeah.
And then there will be control over the content of the film world also. That also they will try. Whatever be the avenues along which ideas reach the heads of the people, they will try to control.
Yeah. We will very soon have a section on public policy, criminality, culpability. This has not been incorporated because we have only been learning from the Western public policy. If we bring down the policy down to our country or South Asia, we will have the public policy very strongly being used for criminality and for culpability.
Yes.
And how are these created and how the constitution is compromised for that? These are certain questions which are coming to our minds, but we do not have a theoretical framework in which we can actually take it up in a classroom in a more benign manner. But these are emerging areas which are soon going to come, and they're going to come from law, not from public administration.
And strangely, they are calling it growth. That is they're calling it like it's growing, the acceptance, they're saying it in the name of growth. You have to change. And they're saying it's growing. I don't know. I don't find any growing part.
Yeah, the public policy, actually, we've lost planning commission where we knew what the targets were. We've got a lot of advocism now because of Niti Aayog, and which doesn't have very organized, number of people working over there. It doesn't have a cadre also to work. So people are picked up according to the choice of the chief executive. And the larger planning is failing out because there's nobody representing the land and the grassroots and the agriculture over there.
Actually.
One is a technologist, the other is a bureaucrat. The two people are running the show. One is a space scientist.
Yes.
The other is a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
We are doing a lot on space. We are achievers in the space.
Oh, yes.
So, okay, we can end now.
Yes, ma'am, we'll end now. Kirti, please do the honors. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Firstly, I would start thanking Amita ma'am for providing such a wonderful lecture. It was really insightful and enlightening. And thank you all the participants for joining today. I hope you all enjoyed the lecture, and we'll see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. for the next lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Amita ma'am. Thank you, Amita ma'am. Thank